All right, so it is time for Cymbal Talk number 7. This is the final Cymbal Talk of 2020. Here we are, and today we are talking with Tague Wilkins. So once again, Cymbal Talk is a series of interviews and discussions with local artists focusing on their sounds and the stuff that they use to create music. So bit of a backstory, Tague and I were in a band. I was bass player for the last soundtrack. So kind of my first band experience there, which was pretty rad, and definitely a fun introduction to the awesomeness that being part of a band can be. But today we're talking about Tague's solo record. So we're going to dive into that and talk a bit about the recording process and some of those things. So man, super stoked to do this. This should be a blast. So kind of want to go back to the beginning here, man. Let's go back to square one. Like, what kind of got you interested in music and wanting to pick up a guitar and start jamming?
Well, so I mean, my father, he's been a lifelong musician. He used to take me to his gigs, when I was really just a toddler, and to his band practices. And I think I got my first guitar when I was around about 4 years old. It was this little $60 acoustic thing. I never really learned to play it, but I actually didn't start taking guitar lessons at all until I think I was actually 13. Well, I got the electric guitar I still have, that Fender Stratocaster, yeah, exactly, that one, the same one. And the year before, and then I took my first lesson when I was 13 with the same guy I still see today. And well, the rest of it's just kind of, I just kind of randomly picked things up as I went along in the following years. I think I joined the first band. Coincidentally, the first week that the same week that I took that first lesson, with another friend of mine, we just did the end of the year talent show with just a really unlistenable rendition of "School's Out" by Alice Cooper. I remember, because this was a kid who had learned his first chord a week in advance. So, after that, actually, we stuck around for a couple of years. And it was just a few years later that it was the last soundtrack. That was in 2008, I think. So, if I'm not mistaken.
Something like that.
Yeah. Then that's, I always enjoyed music and all. It's sort of actually being a musician didn't really come to me until I'm going to say I was around 13 or 14.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely there's a point of playing music and then kind of actually getting it. And how it all works. So definitely want to dive into the songwriting approach that you have for Nebulae versus what we were jamming on, what we were doing. And there are definitely some similarities in that music, but genre wise it's definitely from a different place. How did you approach songwriting high school versus now?
I think when I was in high school, it was a lot more about sort of emulating whatever I was listening to at the time. Probably just how anybody else would have started off. Whereas there was a specific sound, exact pitch, exactly, it was like a straight up formula. I mean, I didn't really feel like I was following as much of a creative streak or really trying to be very, inventive or, just wasn't as much of that kind of divergent mindset that I kind of tried to adapt a little bit more, in the years post last soundtrack. With when I first started songwriting, it was more, I'd say it was all really experience. I mean, I think that after a few years, you write something you're comfortable with, and then you kind of find out what you're not just with what you're comfortable writing, but what you feel like your sound is most kind of suited for. I mean, I've some of the stuff on this album was sort of, especially as when you're writing it as a solo artist, it's just kind of it just sounds very in sync and sort of very kind of represents kind of a expanding your comfort zone, but also something that you're just kind of more naturally attuned to. So.
Speaking of comfort zone, man, one of the standouts for me listening to Nebulae was the vocals, man. Really swell job on a bunch of those songs, stuff that I haven't heard you do. They just sounded great, man. So well done. wanted to talk about kind of your approach to this thing as an album. When did it become an album versus maybe songs you were working on or ideas that you had? And I guess ultimately, when did the writing start for the concept of this album, this entity?
So it's interesting. It was not actually when this first came to be at all, really. So this project, technically, I first started recording 3 years ago. And it was just going to be, I think, a 3 or 4 song EP. I think it's just, it was nowhere near really the comprehensive, cohesive project that, that we're talking about right now. And I don't even think it was called Nebulae, actually. Um, and it was just, I think the only 3 songs that were on it were Nebulae, Pennsylvania, and Rebel, and maybe 1 or 2 that I'd written years back that I was going to remaster. But so I went in there in the studio and did a couple demos, and I had kind of mixed feelings about it at first. I just wasn't really happy with what I was doing. It just wasn't. There was something about it that was missing, because they sounded a lot different than they do today, and it just kind of. And then a year later, just magically, as I went through changes in my life and everything, it just kind of clicked. I just found myself kind of returning back to the music, really, in general, with a whole new approach to it. And I just realized what it was I wanted to do, what sound I was pursuing. And suddenly it was so much, the process just became way more fluid. And then as I decided, I think I'm going to add one more song, and then maybe one more song. And, I think I kept saying this maybe 3 or 4 times, whereas it was just, I think it just needs one more song. And then I finally, producer, Derek Chafin, same old guy that we're familiar with. He just said in the studio one day, like, this is basically a full album, right? Like, this is not like this is 10 songs, man. Like, it's an album. And kind of had to admit, okay. It's in fact, I think actually it was supposed to be 9 songs. And then that song Dawn, it's the closing song on the album, was literally a last minute decision, like a month out from fully finishing and mastering the process. And that it just kind of, I was jamming one night, came up with it, and I thought, well, actually, I like that a lot, and I just want to put that on there. Something that's just kind of unplugged, no real, no other instrumentals involved, just for kind of underproduced, just simple, something simple to kind of and authentic, just to close it out. And I remember, like, Derek, I remember the look he gave me, like, when I came in, because we were done. The thing was ready to be mixed, and he was just like, dude, we're all done, and you want to do another one? Because this, it took a year to do all this, because it was a lot of time, and what also made it challenging was this had a completely different sound. It was basically just completely slicing it up and redoing it, like, just in the middle of the production, which is, not always optimal when you're a musician going to the studio. So it was a little bit of a troubled production in that sense, just kind of like realizing, like, right after I'd even done a bunch of demos, like, that I wanted to do something completely different. And so I'd say this album actually really became an album, at least as you're hearing it now, 6 to 8 months out from when it was actually mastered. So it was, I just kind of discovered it as I went along, what I wanted to do with this, and also what it needed. One advantage actually really was actually kind of restraining myself from listening to some of the demos too much, some of the rough tracks. So, like, I'd listen to it, I'd do like a version in the studio, and then listen to it again, like, after a week, to see if I was still happy with it, and not let myself get too, like, conditioned to hearing it. So I'd be like, all right, I'm happy with it. And then, like, a week later, be like, okay, now I know what the missing link is, so that definitely helped. But yeah, that's an interesting story. This project really wasn't supposed to be, it was just kind of, it just kind of came about just by kind of trial and error and listening to it, and just, and just kind of figuring out by frustration after frustration as I went along,
Gotcha. When did the actual kind of, I guess, what was a demo process originally, right? Like, when did that kind of all start? You mentioned like a year or so in terms of, like, kind of getting everything out.
That is a good question, because some of that stuff I wrote in like the winter of 2017. I was sampling around with it. Like Nebulae was one of them. You know, I did this. I did like it was like a 40-second snippet like on GarageBand, you know, and I thought, hey, I kind of like that melody I have. I think I can make something out of that, you know, and then I think I was just really, really wanted to hear it, you know, like in a from a professional standpoint. So, you know, I took that one, Rebel, you know, I think Pennsylvania. I think those three were the ones I took into the studio. And again, it wasn't there's something I was as passionate about when I first went in there. It was more just, you know, hey, like, you know, let's go record, let's go have fun with this kind of thing. You know, it wasn't really as much of like, let's really like nail this. You know, it was more like, let's, you know, hey, let's have some fun. You know, let's see how this sounds. And it probably wasn't until, you know, I heard the demos that, again, they weren't bad. They just maybe wasn't what I heard in my head, you know, and there was and you've probably been in the situation where I put a lot of like, you know, filler stuff on there, you know, just so I could, cause you know, where I wanted to hear it so much, I didn't really care what else I did, you know, where I'd put stuff there just to kind of fill in the gaps, like, you know, certain guitar licks or certain, you know, just vocal additions. But, and it might have even just helped, like just coming back to it a year later, and hearing it, and also just with, as other changes were made in my life, and there was so much more determination to get back to the music, you know, just that fresh mindset of like, hey, let's just completely redo this. So yeah, it sort of just kind of came, it originated really just from a time where I just, you know, came up with some melodies and just wanted to have some fun with them, you know, and just see how they sounded, you know.
I get it, man. Absolutely. So not to get too personal, man, but I mean, you know, I think something that maybe a lot of folks are running into this year, myself included, you know, have been kind of refocusing on the music, right? Because there was a time where there was this goalpost of the next gig, the next recording, the next practice, the next writing session, the next gig, that you had something to work for, and that thing is gone. And you know, on certain days and certain weeks, it can be really tough to kind of drive yourself, you know, to get to where you need to be, and to put as much time in as you need to stay where you were at, or to improve from where you were at. I mean, what did you find, you know, going back to kind of your moment here? What inspired you to get back into the music?
It's interesting. I think I felt like at that time my life was not directionless, but in a little bit of a rut where I was kind of trying to figure out where I was going with my future, kind of what I wanted to do. And see, this was going back to about a little over 2 years ago, that summer, I think 2018. I was overworking myself like to the extreme. I was doing doing well over 40 hours a week, picking up extra shifts, and just completely, it kind of dug myself into a hole. It completely, you know, isolated myself from a lot of things, and just was so, yeah, I mean, was making a lot of money and all, but at the same time was just wasn't really slowing down and really thinking like, where's this going? You know, what is my strategy? You know, just with life. You know, what do I actually want to do with my life? And then I kind of convinced myself to take a 2-week break from work, which I did. Took 2 weeks off. Then out of nowhere, I decided, you know, I took a trip to Seattle, you know, that August, which came out of nowhere, but it turned out to be like a great, just spur of the moment decision, because it just was a great way just to escape and slow things down, just to re-examine things. And yeah, when I came back, I just felt like just such a resurgence, such a replenishment just of energy, and just kind of thinking about, like, you know, not so just with the music, but thinking about like, hey, do I want to apply to grad school? Do I really want to start looking for a new job? Like really just kind of looking off to the future. And it just kind of cleared things up in a way. And the music, that was a big thing. I just realized how much I missed the music. But even that, I don't think it was just that. That had kind of been building up. And it probably was at first sparked when I took a trip to Nashville earlier that spring, you know, saw a lot of the talent down there. And it just kind of reminded me of like, man, I've just been kind of neglecting the music lately. I feel like I want to get back to that. And after I just managed to slow things down by taking a trip to Seattle, and taking a break from, doing like 50 hours of work, a week, I realized, okay, like I'm actually going to do this. And then when I heard those demos, that were kind of, that were kind of subpar, I was like, I'm going to revolutionize these things. And so, and yeah, just, it clicked. I felt like the sound was just kind of naturally coming to me, what I wanted. And even just in the studio, like I would hear something and someone would just come up and be like, I want to put like a clap track in there and maybe just, maybe dial back some of the guitars here. And just, I feel like a lot of it was kind of on autopilot. And just cause I felt like there was so much more passion and just energy in there that just had been missing, when I was just like hunkered down in a lot of things, I think just letting myself just stop really that season was a big gift to myself, because it actually let myself get back to what really most mattered. So
yeah, it's important to take a break, and just kind of let things happen sometimes.
Yeah, and that's, and again, it just and the way it let me get back to the music, when I felt like getting back to the music itself, it was like that just changed everything. I felt like everything was better. I felt like my mental health improved, everything. I felt more productive at work, better at home, everything. And just after I got back to the music, that was really like the best decision I made that year, was to really get back to that project and start pursuing this album project.
So let's talk about the recording process, man. So Derek is the man, for those who do not know. His studio is rad and he makes some awesome stuff. So, listening to those tracks, there's a ton of stuff that's going on and the production is excellent. So kind of want to dive into, from your perspective, where you come in with a song, how do you go from that point A to point B? Do you lean on Derek for a lot of that stuff and a lot of the instrumentation that you find on there, or?
No, I lean on him. Just I was just asking, like, how it sounds, what he thinks the direction which is going, because he's he'll tell you the truth, and ultimately he's and this is something I think some producers struggle with, is kind of walking that line between being the guy and doing what you're paid to do, but also being like an asset, being like a good advisor, and knowing where that balance is. And I think he ultimately, obviously, he's the guy for hire and he'll do what you want to do, but he won't hold anything back. Like if he thinks what you're doing is a bad idea, or if he'd rather do something different, he'll say, listen, like I'll tell you, this is how it sounds, like this is how your audience is going to hear this. And we sometimes did butt heads a couple times, and he wasn't always happy with my ideas. And sometimes I took his advice, sometimes he would say, yeah, I would maybe rearrange this, maybe put this drum track earlier, and, or dial this back. And sometimes I would hear it several times and I would kind of see it. And other times he actually admitted he was wrong with a couple things that I added in there, especially with Nebulae. That song was very different sounding at first. There was a lot more presence of like the piano, a clean piano in those verses. Like the ukulele wasn't in there. That Hey vocal track wasn't in there. The female backup vocals weren't in there. And a lot of that stuff he was telling me were like, he thought originally sounded out of place. So your audience is going to like that. It's going to sound awkward. And then he heard it and he was like, no, actually it works. No, I love it. But no, I think that if it's something I know I want, no, I won't really lean on it. I mean, and that's when it's more about just getting the production right. So the listener is hearing what I'm hearing. But I think that, but he's definitely a guy who, because once he knows, he's very good at knowing what you're aiming for, when we're trying to record something, when you're trying to convey a message of like, okay, this is what I'm trying to make it sound like. If you're drawing a comparison saying, like, I want it to sound more like the Shins or, something like this, or I'm looking more towards like I don't know, the Pixies, or let's pick something else, or something completely different, Motley Crue, but, and he'll be like, oh, okay, I get it. But, so for production, yeah, I mean, that's when he's definitely the go-to guy. Songwriting, no, not really, because I mean, ideally you're going to want to have that, already laid out before you go into the studio. I'm not saying I've always followed that principle, but I'm saying, I mean, that's probably the ideal thing. So.
Now, for the musicians on there, I mean, what did you play ultimately? Obviously, besides guitar and vocals, did you contribute anything else?
So I'm doing everything except for the drums and piano.
Dang,
Yeah.
Staying busy, man.
Everything else is me. Oh, and the female vocals. My friend Kylie Davin lent those, and she did a great job.
Yeah, there's a lot of sound on that record, man. So that's super impressive that a lot of that is coming from you. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was, again, it's a lot of that. It wasn't the plan. I mean, I compared it when it was being mastered to when it first started. I thought, like, this really, this really became something I never expected it would be. It was and I felt a lot of it just kind of came naturally. It wasn't really as much of like doing homework, which is like, all right, let's just try to get this done. Let's do 12 songs. And just kind of. And I felt like when I kind of let that come naturally, and when I felt like there was a new song. Oh, sorry, the new friend has joined us here.
All good, all good.
Then it just, like I said, it was just so much more fluid and just easier to know what I wanted to do. I think just the most challenging part really was just remastering certain songs, especially songs from years ago that I just thought I wanted to maybe update more to my current level as a musician, where I thought like, okay, these songs sounded good for the level I was at the time, but I just feel like I'm just a better musician now. I want to remaster them. That was very difficult with certain songs, just adding on different tracks and just trying to, a song from the top down is not as easy, as it looks.
Yeah,
sometimes. So
totally hear that, man. So, all right, everyone's favorite question. Do you have a favorite song on the record?
A favorite song. I think a song I probably would like listen to the most if you'd ask me, or a song. Probably Dawn, actually. Just probably because that one I felt was just very me, in every way. Just the way that song was written, the way that song came out. I felt like, especially when it came to the lyrical content of the album, I felt I was really striking at the core with that song, and I just felt like the lyrics and just the ambiance really just matched and just were in sync. So that one, and I'd see either that one or Marry Me, just because, again, it was sort of a similar thing. And where that song was written in a surprisingly short amount of time. And I wrote that one actually for my sister's wedding some years back. And when I first wrote it, it was like the night before her wedding. And I thought, I didn't think it was good at all. And I thought it was going to be like, mocked if I dared to play this in front of the crowd. But I did. I was like, all right, let's just do this. Let's just run with this. Played it, and people enjoyed it a lot, and kept it ever since. So those two songs, yeah, I probably the most passionate about. Yeah. So if you were to ask me which songs I would probably like, if there was like a huge fire and all the tracks, all the lyrics, everything just got wiped, just out of existence, or there was an EMP and just all these tracks got wiped out of existence, I would probably choose one of those two tracks to keep if I can only choose one of those two. So,
I like that, man. And
I mean, generally, yeah.
Awesome, man. So want to dive into, because there's a lot of folks that are, releasing music and, kind of releasing on different platforms and things like that. So saw a Facebook post a while back. You had some release issues. As someone who's recently kind of gone through the process here, do you have any tips for anyone that's going to be releasing music on really any platform, but and even some maybe pointers that work best for you, things that you found were good, not so good?
And this is the harsh truth, is because here's the thing. I mean, I did the homework, man. When I when I went through this release process. Like before I chose a distributor, the one I first had trouble with, like I spent hours like making sure this was the right one. I listened to reviews. I listened to guys on YouTube that had used like TuneCore, CD Baby, all these different ones. I combed through many different ones. Like I did the same thing with what you're asking me, you know, and I learned that ultimately it's like, you don't really know until you know, because because guess what? Like this distributor that I first signed up for, the one I had trouble with, like they ended up doing everything that so many different reviewers and people told me that they were like one of the few that did not like do these things, you know? And, yeah. And ultimately it's like through experience, you know, it's all you, it's like, you know, and so, obviously, you know, you just gotta be careful of, you know, who you give money to. Luckily, these guys, I didn't give them any money. That was the one bright side about it. Yeah, but is really, yeah, just always get second opinions, but also I've learned sometimes fifth and sixth opinions. You know, that's another thing, and because you never know, of course, who's, you know, sponsoring what review or whatever. I mean, that's another thing. You know, and you know what? Be very patient too. I think another thing that's, yeah, I think that might have been something that, looking back on it, I probably should have made sure that this distributor actually worked and everything was going to work fine, like, you know, before like setting a release date and all that, and probably announcing to everybody, hey, this is the weekend it's going to be available, and then saying, all right, this distributor I signed up with, let's see if these guys work, you know. But although in my defense they did, I mean, because the upload process, everything did go smoothly, you know, and it wasn't until, that release day that suddenly everything just face planted. And everything was fine now. I mean, I got a new one, and, you know, and everything seems to be going fine. But really, yeah, I just say don't be afraid to take time, you know, because doing it right is better than doing it fast. You know, even if because you know, you got to remember. Because I mean, I felt like this before too, you know, like when you feel like, oh, I got to get it out now, I got to get it out and start pushing this. But you guys still got to remember, like as an independent artist, most people don't know who you are. So they're not exactly like, you know, sitting around wondering where the hell your music is, you know? So just remember that, like, you know, making sure you have a platform strategy going forward, just work out a plan, you know, and be patient, you know? I mean, even if it means like spending a little more time trying to figure out the right way to do this. Especially because, you know, there's so many, you know, just these companies out there that promise to market your music saying like, oh yeah, well, we'll get you on Spotify, we'll get you on Apple Music. But, you know, the thing is, if you don't really have a platform, really something to market with, then, you know, well, then it's your loss. So.
Right. Absolutely. So, you know, I guess want to kind of dive into as well, you know, you had an album, you know, coming out. Did you have, you know, let's say, you know, 2020, things were perfectly normal, nothing changed. Was the next steps for you to kind of gig this thing? And did you see it kind of going in a certain place?
Yeah, I did. Yes, definitely. I was looking at, you know, a CD release party. I even thought about maybe doing something with doing like a co-release party with another, you know, friend or so, another maybe whoever else might have been releasing an album. Thought about that too, to maybe like, you know, double the exposure a bit. Was definitely planning on getting back to gigs and, you know, and getting around and promoting this, which, you know, you still can do, thankfully, thanks to the digital age. You know, I mean, there's Facebook Live, there's, you know, Zoom, like what we're doing. There's a lot. And thankfully, I'm going to say this was something that was one of the few things that 2020 did not negatively affect, surprisingly, just because this is the music anyway, at least didn't require as much socialization, unless you count, you know, doing live shows, which again, you can still do. Luckily, at this point, when, I mean, this pandemic first hit, I mean, I was still in the middle of getting this project mastered and finding a distributor, you know, which took months, and then figuring out just a whole plan. going forward. I mean, and just figuring out what kind of photo shoots I want to do, getting cover art figured out, getting where I wanted to shoot it, and then of course getting people to pose for it and and also participate. It was definitely it was something that I had told myself like, yeah, I can get it done in a week, I can get it done in a month, and no, it was oh no, it took months. So I guess that was actually one of the good things is like I had plenty of work laid out for me, when all the other like, just shenanigans from 2020 were going on. So I'd say surprisingly, this is there were a lot of things I'd say, just culminated in disappointing results this year. But I would say this was not one of them, surprisingly.
That's good, man. That's really good. Yeah, I mean, I think if you're releasing something on, that isn't maybe for live consumption, you're in a decent spot. It's not the end of the world. It sucks that you can't play the stuff live, but people can still hear it, people can still interact with it, and that's pretty rad.
Right. If the recording process is still going on, it probably would have been a different story, just because that does require a lot more, socialization, close contact, and I don't really know what would have happened, but my guess is that there might have been some more complications involved. But thankfully, like all the actual recording was done, long gone before this hit. So I mean, I don't really know what would happen, but my guess is it definitely would not have been as fluid, as it was otherwise. So I'm at least thankful that most of the stuff that really required a lot of like, personal contact was already wrapped up. But yeah, that's something I definitely lucked out on, was that was all taken care of. But then again, but when all the work after that, just with like all the work was just on me, so there was plenty to do when you were hunkered down inside. So in that aspect.
Right on, man. Well, Tague, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about your album, and people should check it out. I will have the link down below for Nebulae. Where can people find your tunes, man? Like, where should people go, if they want to find out about you as an artist and see what you're about?
Well, you can find it just about anywhere, or at least you should be. iTunes, Apple Music, Spotify, Pandora, Napster. At least it's supposed to be. I'll tell you, Pandora. And if they're not there, they're supposed to be. I'll tell you that. And please send me a message on either on Instagram, Facebook, where I'm there under Tague Wilkins. And you can even find it on Amazon actually, if you just want to download the individual songs or the album. But yeah, just about every major musical platform, yes, the album is available on. You can also, it's YouTube as well, Instagram, my Facebook profile, and all those sites also include all the links you would need to access or download, the music. So and there will be some new music videos coming out as well in the next couple of months, which I'm working on. So yes, I've hopefully, and this new distributor has worked out so far, in the sense that so far, I haven't really heard any complications about people being able to access the music, which I'm very thankful.
Right on, man. That's rad. Well, again, dude, thank you so much for doing this. Again, this has been Cymbal Talk episode 7 with Tague. You can check out his music in the links and in some of the spots that he mentioned. Thanks.